and looking at site visits and making those thorough and consistent so everyone's held to a similar standard. We're working with our Manage My Market to make it not only user-friendly, but helping us get the information to limit the number of times we need to bother people for information. We have the bulk canning grant. That was a great success last year. We're continuing to survey our customers and then revisiting our resale policy as well, as you saw in our recommendations. I won't read all of these. I know Kathleen's going to talk about these coming up soon, just the recommendations that our commission came up with this year. So there's a number of them that we were cleaning up the language, trying to make our policy manual a little bit more user-friendly or reader-friendly, and cleaning up the process so it's streamlined for our vendors to apply and understand what rules to follow or what kind of guidelines we enforce. And then upcoming for 2014 and 2015, a goal as our commission is to have consumer and vendor forums to help inform our commission's discussion and recommendations. We have noticed that there's a lot of opinions and a lot of enthusiasm for the market, and we want to make it easier for the community and vendors to use the commission as a resource to try and make concise recommendations to to make public comment more useful in the commission meetings. We also want to explore the possibilities for a volunteer group to help support the market, and we'll continue to review the policies to make sure that they fit with the community council and the common practices that we see nationwide. And we want to increase our outreach via social media. We have a pretty large following, and we want to be more targeted in how we talk to our community members who already love the market and getting them more engaged with it. We will continue to discuss the 4th Street expansion that has been brought to the commission. We want to work on defining vendor, as was recommended by some vendors at the admin meeting, and talking about what is local, which is a much larger conversation than we can talk about this evening. So those are just a few of the highlights that we hope to hit in the next year. Overall, as a commission, I think we just want to be more proactive. We want to hear from people as we're making decisions, as we're making recommendations. And so a big focus in the upcoming year is more communication out and more communication coming into the commission to use it as a really successful conduit to City Council and to Kathleen. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Aaron. Council has any questions for Aaron? Walter?
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned the homecoming parade.
Yeah.
After the fact, how did that work out? And you may want to just recap for people very briefly what the issue was.
Sure. There was a conversation around homecoming this past year about the parade going down Main Street and what would happen to the farmers market. In the end, it was decided that the farmers market would move back to the parking lot so the parade could remain on Main Street. We, Gina and I, and some other members of our outreach subcommittee met with Vandal Alumni Relations after homecoming, and they felt that it was a really good collaboration, and we brainstormed more ways to work together in the following year, trying to connect maybe our vendor alum members and make it more of a Vandal farmers market for that day. And so I think out of the chaos of this last year grew some good opportunities for connection, and they're really excited to try and make the most out of that Saturday, to take the opportunity of both members of the events, I suppose.
Hope that we don't end up in the lack of a better term, Chinese fire drill at the last minute. Everybody running around trying to figure out what we're going to do, what we're going to do. So hopefully forward to that, work with the UI, stay in touch with the staff through Kathleen so that we don't, everybody gets so confused about what's right, what's wrong, who's impacted, who isn't impacted, and are we trying to throw U of I homecoming under the bus or something. So
trying to keep everybody out from under the bus, I think.
Everybody happy.
Yes, and everybody happy. I think we've had some really good discussions about how to make the most of both events on the same day. Those are two big competing events, and if we can continue communications, which I think we can, I think it'll be even better than it has been in the past. So, and we will get it sooner than last time. Dan's shaking his head.
As you said in your presentation, I served as the council liaison last year. folks on the commission did a terrific I think that the folks on the all of your hard work getting
One other item on your list, again, was expansion into the question of expanding into 4th Street.
Yes.
Thing I would like to caution, at the end of the market last year, a couple of Saturdays, heard that it needs to remain. Keep that in mind when you're looking at that. Kathleen's going to say.
Kathleen's going to address you, Walter.
We certainly will not, is what she's going to say.
Well, that was a mayor staff decision to accommodate a few vendors and
if I may. And
Barry?
as long as they are movable booths, they do not violate fire code. We checked with the fire department on that. They're inconvenient. We'd like to not have them there, but it didn't violate the code. But you're absolutely right. We need to take a look at that.
Questions? Thank you, Aaron, for the very nice report. Kathleen, did you have anything else right at this moment you want to address, Kathleen?
to homecoming parade. The Moscow was actually in the parade this year. So we had 4 wagons. We had a carrot, a pea pod. Amanda was the strawberry, and we had a corn towing Tonemaker's apples. So that was a major accomplishment.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, we're going to move on, folks. Item number 6, which is the 1912 Center Annual Report, the Heart of the Arts, Dwight Curtis and Jenny Kostroff. Dwight, you have the podium, sir.
Good evening. As you know, annually, the Heart of the Arts gives you an annual report on the ongoings at the 1912 Center. They took over the management of this city-owned facility in May of 2007. And we work with them regularly, and also give you quarterly reports as well. So anyway, here's Jenny Kostroff to give you 5 minutes of great entertainment.
Added the time limit in there really sneakily.
Take whatever time you
He's
need,
like,
Jenny.
So, but there's magic buttons, Dwight. You didn't push them. Whoa. No one has to push the magic buttons. Okay, alrighty. Is it the arrow? This is. Okay. Okay. She gave me the secrets. Okay, my name's Jenny Kostroff, and I am very happy to represent Heart of the Arts Incorporated for you tonight, telling you all about what we've been up to at the 1912 Center in our annual report. Heart of the Arts' mission is to enrich lives and create community by operating and restoring the 1912 Center. And we have enjoyed working with the center since 2007, and so we would like to tell you who's on our board right now. We have some board representatives in the audience as well. Our president is Jay Pangilly, who's here. And Mary Dupree is our vice president this year, and Judy Brown serves as our treasurer. Lorene Sorensen is our secretary. And on our directors, we have in the audience Jody Burke and Andrea Fountain, but we also have Miranda Anderson, Katie Luna, Kelly Moore, Linda Paul, Lawrence Rose, and Bill Terrio. And Bill Terrio represents Friendly Neighbors, which is one of the tenant organizations at the 1912 Center. And so we are working to always have a representative of Friendly Neighbors serve so that they have a voice in the center. We're going way back because we're reminding you of all the fun things that we've done. So in 2008, we completed the West Wing, which added the Arts Workshop space and the Fisk Community Room to spaces that we run in the center. So we have 5 to 6 very active spaces in the center, and that added value to the facility. Then in 2009 and 2010, we worked on the exterior tuck pointing, brick restoration and cleaning, window replacement, and the cornice up at the top got painted and sealed. So the 2 sides of the facility in 2009 and 10 look like a brand new building on the outside, which is pretty impressive. That shell restoration project added 52 new windows to the facility so we now have the same to do on the front of the building left, but we'll get to that. In 2011, we got the retaining wall finally put in along the parking lot, and that was phase 1 of our parking lot construction project. We also worked on the interior in the kitchen, upgrading the kitchen equipment with help from the Idaho Community Foundation and an Avista Foundation grant, and upgraded the hood to a chemical drop system instead of, it was powder, and now it's liquid. Very exciting. And ceiling fans in the great room. In 2012, the parking lot project was completed, adding 15 new parking spaces to the site so that the complete 1912 Center site now has a full parking lot. It has a sidewalk entry into the west end of the facility, and quality contractors finished that project on time. And this is more views of our parking lot without snow on them. I thought everyone would enjoy seeing the parking lot with no snow, because right now it has snow in weird places. So that's our parking lot phase 2 project got completed. We also worked on the east end entrance as a part of that to make it more user-friendly and connecting the outside world to the building by putting in a piece of sidewalk where there had been a car parked where you couldn't get through. So has helped a lot in terms of arriving to the building, that you're not feeling like you're crashing into a car when you're trying to get into the center. We replaced the flooring in the kitchen with a long-term tile floor, which has been fantastic. That was one of the most fun things that we've done, because it's now they've told me you could just hose that thing off, and we actually have gotten it that wet before, not on purpose, but it does work very well. A little squeegee action and you're good to go. Yeah. You're not getting the rest of that story, David. And in 2013, we worked on the exterior site with landscaping projects, and we've got pictures. The Grop guys don't know that I took pictures. And all of the lights on the west end parking lot are now completed, and that finished the site work, which got us a lovely certificate of occupancy, which is very exciting. So now we're very official in our first ground floor occupancy of the 1912 Center. So that's pretty exciting. And Andrea, do you see you're in a picture up there digging in the dirt? Very exciting. That was a fun day. The 2013, we had a service day with the SYNC program, which was the University of Idaho first-year students. It's called Serving Your New Community. That service day planted all of our plants on the site, and we had Heart of the Arts board members and President, students, Bruce Pittman was there, and Past Mayor Cheney was there, and it was quite a wonderful day and really got these folks involved in our town right on their first days in town. So that was all completed in 2013. Programming this past year, we participated not only in Art Walk, but also hosted 4 art openings, 4 shows in the center ourselves for the season of Summer Plaza concerts out on the plaza 4 times during our second free family prom in November, which was well attended, and members of Festival Dance were present to help bring the young people out with their families. Now in our 10th season of the winter market, and we have 6 markets. We did 2 markets in November and 2 in December this season to expand that. We have a market coming up this Saturday, February 8th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can do some shopping. You know you're missing all of that farmer's market feeling with everybody talking about farmer's market. That's kind of what we got going on. It'll be really cold, so you need to come out of your houses into my lovely 1912 Center facility that will keep you warm while you shop. And there will be vegetarian chili available for lunch, so that'll be fun. And this Friday, you should come see that lovely dog up there. Dana Aldis painted that dog. His name is Benny, and he is one of 25 dogs that she has featured in our Raining Cats and Dogs show. Today we received art for this show, so I'm just at the beginning of understanding what kind of cool show I have this Friday, and there are over 57 pieces of art that I get to catalog and label and hang and all enjoy on Friday. So Friday from 5 to 8 is our art opening for Raining Cats and Dogs, the community art show. We will have the Gypsy Dogs playing music, and you can vote for Best of Show Cat and Best of Show Dog artwork, and the winners of those awards will get $50. The artists will be very excited about that because that buys art supplies. So, good stuff, or dinner out, depending on where they go with it. And that'll be this Friday, and we're also serving hot dogs and cat wine. So, there's wine in bottles that are shaped like cats that we're serving as our wine of the evening. Now, someone might say wine and a hot dog, but hey, it's thematic. It goes with the theme. So there you go. So hopefully you can come on by. Spaces to rent, just to go through, we have 5 spaces that we actively rent in the building. And those are the Great Room and Plaza. The Plaza and Great Room go together. Although you can have an event out on the plaza without using the Great Room, but you would be renting the Great Room. The kitchen has been rented a number of times by itself as a commercial kitchen space, and it also gets rented along with the Great Room space. Amanda Hickston House, who was here, she actually was one of our early renters in the commercial kitchen space for Sticky Fingers Farms before they got a commercial kitchen on their property. So that a lot of that early delicious ice cream that came from them was cooked. Then we have the Fisk Community Room that is a 700 square foot room that rents for $15 an hour to the community. And the Arts Workshop space that serves it doubles as a dojo, because a lot of the time we have dojo activities in there, martial arts. We have Aikido in there tonight, working hard with mats all over the floor. And then tomorrow is fencing in the Arts Workshop. So arts is a larger term. There are a lot of art forms, and so you get into all kinds of arts. So and karate sometimes is in the Arts Workshop as well. Friendship Hall can be rented in the evenings, so we do have book groups and meeting groups that use that room as well, because it has a more casual feeling with couches and tables and chairs and things for gatherings and watching movies and things together for groups. So 2014 is upon us, so we're going to be doing some fun work at the building. We received a promise of an Idaho Heritage Trust grant for $4,500 to match to do work on the balustrade above the west entrance of the building. And so we'll be working on that in conjunction with doing the work on the exterior and the east end of the facility this year. So we're hopefully going to be able to get our plans together and go out to bid in May or June of this year, and then start the construction as soon as possible. This will replace 22 windows on the east end of the facility, and I don't think, does this have a little pointer thingy? The little... She found it for me. Thank you. This is new to me. So this is the balustrade that I'm talking about, and we will be replacing this one, cleaning it, repairing it, replacing it, as well as the one on the west end of the facility that did not get done as a part of that project. So both of those will get done as a part of our work in 2014. And we're really excited about this. Each one of the windows, they're huge, and they're more than $2,000 a piece, but you can sponsor a window for a mere $1,912 and have your name put on a plaque on the window, and I am happily, shamelessly promoting those windows because all 22 on this end of the building need to be adopted. So we're looking for adopters. Very exciting. And I thought I would finish with a lovely picture of my staff at present. We have... this is Madeline. She's working right now with the Boy Scouts up there in the great room having their blue and gold banquet. This is Max Hawley, and Max has been with us for 2 seasons, 2 years. He's coming up on his 2nd year. And this is Tessa Grundler, and she's worked with us for almost a year now. And they're fantastic employees and work really hard with your events and activities. They'll be happy to work with anybody at the building, as well as I am happy to work with anybody at the building. And so I open it up to questions from this esteemed group of people.
Jenny, you're just a few months shy of having 7 years.
Yeah, in May.
May 1st, so here we are. It's just a few months away, and I got to tell you, one of the things I always enjoyed was your enthusiasm. Your enthusiasm has not diminished 1 inch in these 7 years, and in fact, it keeps growing. So I get excited every time I get a chance to hear a report from you. Back 7 years ago, folks, you'd drive by here, and once in a blue moon, we'd have an event there because there wasn't much going on in those days. And then that started creeping in a few more and a few more, and now it's a weekly event. There's multiple things going on all the time. And the more we have this building, the more of a wonderful resource it is for our community. And I just appreciate the job that you and your team has done, Jenny, in promoting it and keeping it going. And the 1912 adopted window is a terrific idea. And
some beauties to be adopted. You can have your name on them on a plaque for a long time. Long time.
Terrific.
It'll outlast all of us, so that's pretty exciting.
Dan?
So I have a daughter that's a sophomore, and she's complaining about having to walk across the street now, like in the olden days when. So tell me about what kind of cooperation you guys are doing with the school district now for classroom use, because both they had the recent flood there, and also I guess you're going to be doing some with during the renovations that the high school is going to start in March.
Yep. So we just had a conversation with the high school and the 1912 Center about what we could make available during the school day for them to have a consistent classroom space across the street after spring break. The construction is slated to start the week of spring break, and we've arranged that the arts workshop space will be a classroom for them from 8 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. Beginning that, like I said, the last week of March is when we will start with them all the way through the end of the school year. And we've agreed to turn them into a tenant so that that rental will be a monthly rental that they pay to the facility. And then in turn, my staff will set up to have that room ready after Aikido and fencing and other activities in the evenings in that space so that it will be available to them to be able to get a jump on those projects. It looked like without having these alternative spaces that the timetable would be dramatically affected for construction, and it made it unfeasible for them to get the job done before the school year begins next fall to get these classrooms updated with the bond measure that they had in place. So I'm real excited that we're able to work with them and make that possible. And it's really neat for us because on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the Friendly Neighbors have the meal in the great room. And so having that that participation of our entire generations coming together in the same spaces is pretty wonderful. Plus, they could go downstairs and have lunch with the seniors if they wanted to.
John?
I'd make a motion that we accept the report.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a motion by John and a second by Tom. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to ask Jenny before we vote?
Jenny, you mentioned the east end and 22 windows.
Mm-hmm. Want to see 'em?
Bidding in May, you thought. Two questions regarding that. Is 22 the sum total of the east end windows? Or
Yeah,
is that-
so if you look, each of these banks is 5 windows,
Okay.
and so there's 10 on each of these plus this one, and then there's one right above the door frame here. So that
Okay.
puts us at 22 on that end. There were other windows that have already been completed and replaced earlier. This is the senior center right here, and this space right here is Friendship Hall. And those have already had their 5 windows each replaced on that level.
And do you have funding for these 22 windows in hand at this time?
Not quite, but we're very close.
How many more windows do you need to
Well,
sell?
we would love to adopt all 22 of these windows, but in the event we don't, we still will begin construction in June of this year with the fundraising that we're working on.
Okay.
They'll still be available to be adopted even after the fact. So until they've been adopted. In my office, I have a plan of the entire facility, and yellow windows are the ones that are in progress, and so they get colored yellow when someone's chosen the window that they're adopting over time and they're making payments on their adoption of a window. And then it becomes green when it's fully adopted and they get their plaque engraved at that time. So I've got plaques in my office for all the windows that have been colored green. So you can come see where all your friends have put their windows, and you can choose yours accordingly.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, sure.
I think we've got a motion by John and a second by Tom, and I think we're ready for a vote. I'll start with Art.
Aye.
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 That's unanimous that we accept your report, Jenny. Thank you very much for the wonderful job you guys do there. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 7, folks, and this is Moscow's Farmers Market Policy Amendment Recommendations. Kathleen, would you present, please?
Okay. Here we go. So I just wanted to show the process that we've been going through for these policy revisions. I know you've been getting a lot of questions, but I just wanted to show you where we started and where we've been going with this. So I looked back on the agenda in the minutes, and we started talking about policy on July 17th, 2013. The final policy recommendations were voted on by the full commission on January 8th, 2014. So between July 17th and January 8th, we had multiple subcommittee meetings, and they were brought up to the full commission, but we didn't make a final vote on policy recommendations until January 8th, 2014. Then after we made the recommendations, we put a packet mailing together to all the seasoned vendors with a statement with the policy recommendations and with notifying the vendors of the policies being on the administrative committee meeting of January 27th and also of city council meeting today. And we included the meetings, the agenda, the meeting minutes, and send it all out to all the vendors. So this is just a brief recap We agreed to eliminate International Day, which was just a resale of crafts from wherever. We only had one walk-on vendor last summer, so it was more work than anything for one vendor. We worked with engaging student groups with the University of Idaho, college students possibly from LCSC. So we put language in the policy on engaging students. We streamlined the children's vendor participation area. It had about 4 paragraphs, and we narrowed it down to about 4 statements. We added Appendix 6, that was with permits and licensing, and that was with Cinda Williams, our extension agent, working with Department of Ag and researching different agencies and offices. We expanded the business site visits for all vendors, not just produce, but we looked at we could do a site visit on a food vendor or possibly a craft vendor, so we included all vendors. We put a line in requiring vendor sales reporting. We've done that in 13, but we put a little teeth to it by saying if they didn't report their sales, then they wouldn't be in the next year's market. So we put a little more emphasis on the sales reporting. 100 air miles to include existing out-of-mileage vendors. And in my administrative report, I highlighted all those vendors that were outside of the 100 air mile area. And the language that we put in the document was if they failed to participate in 14, then they wouldn't be in the market in 15. So we also did a restriction on the resale policy, and we used to have resales on blueberries, asparagus, nuts, and okra. And now it's down to blueberries and asparagus. And the language is the blueberries and asparagus, must be brought to market from within the 100-mile radius. So those were the major changes. We went to Administrative Committee on January 27th. We presented to the Administrative Committee on these policy revisions. We were tasked by the Administrative Committee to rework the policies, remove all the dates in the document to make it easily transferable from year to year. The discretion was given for resale beyond the 100 air miles to myself, the arts director, and or the market manager. We showed the revised map to include the 5th Street block between Main and 5th Street Alley to the east. And then we're here today because we were recommended to send recommendations to the full City Council, which is today, February 3rd.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Yep.
Even though that, before I turn this over to the council, this is not a public hearing, but we received so many different emails and things, I thought I'd open it up for public
Okay.
for the next 15 or 20 minutes and let folks, because we got a number of folks out here, if they want to get up and talk for a few minutes about this. And if you want to speak on this, that'd be terrific. I will give you 3 minutes. If you do that, please state your name and where you live, and we will be more than happy. Come on up, young lady, and you can bring your young'un right up with you. That'll be just fine. You can introduce him as well, so how's that?
My name is Amanda Hickson House. My address is 4410 Highway 8, Troy, Idaho. Do you want to say your name? This is Phoenix, 2-year-old. So as Aaron said earlier, I'm on the Moscow Farmers Market Commission. I'm also a vendor, a prepared food vendor at the farmers market. And I'm also a consumer. I'm at the market every Saturday. I buy a lot of produce there and other things from other people. And I'm a business owner, and I'm a taxpayer, and I'm all sorts of different hats up here talking. And I wanted to give kind of a rebuttal to all of the public comment that came in about the 100 air mile policy. One, in the letters, a lot of people said that it was a rash decision, that it hadn't been thought out, that it's this new huge change to the policies. That is very wrong. A lot of the comments that were made in the letters were, I feel like they were grossly inaccurate and didn't contain the right information of what is fact. The air mile policy of 100 miles has been in effect since at least 2011. If anyone disputes that, I can pull out my big folder and show you the 2011 policies where it had the 100 air mile radiuses in there. Another thing is that a lot of the public comment thought that the Farmers Market Commission, with that recommendation, was kicking out a few token vendors, namely the Durfees, the Tonemakers, Akeley Berry, and the Boothmans. And that is very inaccurate. They are grandfathered in. They're selling at the market. They have been for years, and we are not kicking them out, and we think that they're an important part of the market. So I just wanted to clarify that. And I also feel like a lot of the people that commented don't have really an understanding of the wealth of this agricultural area. I wanted to bring a map that was in the National Geographic a couple years ago, and it's a map of all the soils on the entire planet. And it was amazing to me that on the whole globe there was a little dot that was labeled and it said the Palouse. And I don't think there was anywhere else that was specifically labeled like that. And it showed that the Palouse has the best soil possible on the globe. So this is an amazing agricultural area. And when we have 100 air miles that goes all the way out past Walla Walla and includes the Lewis and Clarkston Valley and is quite a big area. We're talking about air miles, not driving miles. It includes pretty much being able to grow almost anything except for bananas and coffee and cocoa for chocolate, I would say. So some of the comments that said, for example, that there won't be any produce in the market if people from outside 100 miles aren't allowed to come sell is not right. To say that there's no apples and peaches that are grown in this region is very incorrect. I'm sure a lot of you probably have apple trees in your own yard, so you know that that's not right. Also, as far as asparagus and blueberries go, there's 3 regions in Washington that produce 22 million pounds of asparagus annually. One of those is Walla Walla, which is 80 air miles from Moscow, so Walla Walla is included in the region. So there's a huge supply of asparagus that can be brought in from there. Blueberries grow really, really well in this region. I know a number of farmers that grow blueberries, and we did a lot of research when we were looking at making resale of blueberries and asparagus, making sure that they came from within 100 air miles. Our research included identifying vendors that grow blueberries or asparagus from within 100 air miles of Moscow. So I think that in going forward with the farmers market, the mission of the farmers market is to celebrate life on the Palouse by providing the community with the opportunity to buy and sell locally farmed and created produce. And the mission also talks about encouraging and supporting sustainable economic, social, and environmental practices. I feel like if the air miles are extended to 200 air miles, which would go all the way up to Nelson, British Columbia, all the way over to Kellogg, Montana, and over into western Washington and down into Oregon. Some of those vendors could be driving 5 hours one way to come sell at the market. And the only people that are able to financially and have the time to drive 5 hours to sell at one market are those farmers that are big, they're established, they have the resources to be able to do that. So the farmers that will be coming in to sell at the market, if you expand the air miles, I think will be larger operations, and then they'll take up the niches and the increased demand, and then smaller farmers on the Palouse who may want to come into the market won't have that ability to do so. So I would ask the City Council to keep that 100 air mile radius as the goal for vendors, and there is room for exceptions that we have in the policies. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. That's kind of an interesting thing, if you just stay there for a second, is a lot of folks looked at that as 100 miles and not 100 air miles, and that makes a huge difference, because if you went by miles, it's 125 miles to Walla Walla and not 88 air miles. Walter, did you have a question you want to ask her?
If you would. I'm confused over comments that we've received both from customers and vendors and Kathleen, don't want to leave anybody out, regarding the 100 air miles. An email from Aaron said the 100-mile policy is not new, in all caps, or most caps. And you just said the 100-mile policy is not new. And yet it's listed under a bullet on Kathleen's presentation as this change addressing the 100 air miles. It can't be both, so what am I missing?
We'll let Kathleen address that.
Yep. So in your legislative format, there's a sentence that explains the kind of the grandfathering, that if they're participating in the
exception.
13 market, they can participate in the 14, the people that are beyond the 100 air miles. And when Amanda talked about Tonemakers, Boothman, Akeley, Durfee, so the 100 miles has been in existence since probably about 2011 by the advisory board. Then when Randy Fife did the policies in 12, he just automatically put the 100 miles in there. And then last year when we were up against time, I recommended that we not change the 13 policies because we were getting so close to going into market. So I'd say it's been in there at least 3 years.
Walter? Yep. So the change is the grandfathering. And
identifying that and putting it in the document.
And if a outside 100-mile vendor is coming, they can keep coming. But if they miss a season, they're done. So the net effect...
They'll have to reapply. And that's why we put the and/or with the arts director and the market manager, because we do get calls from various folks on Thursdays and Fridays that might be coming from a long way, and we might not have it in the market, and we allow them to come into the market as a walk-on. But the season vendor, if you choose not to participate, they would have to reapply to be in the market again.
Okay, you want to do
Yeah, so I thought I was there, but now I'm confused again. Is the reapply only for people with blueberries and asparagus, or is it an apple vendor from 120 miles away that misses a season?
The example is Tonemakers in Royal City. They've been in our market
Forever.
Forever? Okay, forever, Dan. And they're outside of the 100 air miles. But if they chose not to come this year in 2014, if they wanted to reapply in 15, it would probably go back to the commission, myself, and we'd relook at that.
Okay.
So, just to finish, I'm still working this. The exception talks about will be based upon the availability of product. So an apple vendor at 125 miles that's in can stay in until they don't come, in which case they cannot come back, because there are, as pointed out, apples within 100 miles.
Do you want to answer why that was a recommendation? Yeah.
Okay. I'm better. Thank you.
All right, but, before I get too much of the council asking questions, I'd like to hear from some other folks.
This was just one
Or we're going to end up
legislative-
being an hour on here, because we're going to come back to the council again.
That was just one on the legislative aspect
Okay.
that Walter brought up. When it says you can reapply based on availability of produce, if you're applying in the spring, how do you know what your crop in the fall is going to be? Therefore, how do you predict availability? It seems kind of dicey.
Or you want to speak up?
It has to do with if you're applying for a permit, you're outside the 100 miles, and it says based on the availability of produce. If you're applying in the spring or summer and you're growing apples, how do you know what your availability is going to be a priori? And how does the commission know what the availability or relative availability would be? Makes it a little dicey to issue a permit, doesn't it? See what I'm getting at?
I see what you're getting at, but most of the farmers that participate in the market and the growers pretty much know what they're bringing to market.
That presupposes weather.
Correct?
I wouldn't go there. That's,
Yep.
yeah.
I'm interested in listening to some other folks. Anybody else that want to testify on the farmer's market out here? Let's see if we got anybody else that would like to come up. Come on over, Joanne, if you want to address us. State your name, please, and your address.
Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard, and I'm on the Market Commission. I should have looked this up before I came, but I'm not sure that we said air miles before, because I remember discussing somebody was 110 miles, driving miles. I think we've added air miles, is that right? And that, in a way, expands the region somewhat, because as you pointed out, some places are more than 100 driving miles, but they're within 100 air miles. And I think when we're talking about availability of produce, yeah, it was just 100 miles and not air miles, so that is a change. I think when we're talking about availability of produce, what we're concerned about are the blueberries, blueberries and asparagus. We're hoping that people who want to resell them or sell their own produce will be within 100 air miles. If it turns out that that doesn't happen, and we know people want blueberries, we're giving Kathleen the authority to expand, to allow people to bring in blueberries from outside. We're not talking about selling apples in May when you can't have apples. And I hope it doesn't sound like that's what it means.
It was more to do with the disjoint of somebody applying to be let into the market ahead of time so they can make their plans about who's going to show up and who isn't. Based on, say, if you're selling cherries, who knows if you're going to get rain on your cherries? Do you have a crop or don't you? It gets very dicey. So how do you know who's applying and who's being granted a permit versus what the supply is a priori? I don't think you can do that. Or at least basing your permitting process on Mother Nature's vicissitudes.
Yeah, I'm not understanding.
Thank you, Joanne.
Attempt to speak to that a bit. That the availability, the produce availability in the market was not based on what that vendor who is seeking exception is bringing. It's whether or not the produce that they were planning on bringing is already represented to a sufficient amount in the market. So, one, to answer your question, Walter, if somebody who's already grandfathered in does not participate in subsequent market seasons, they are not kicked out. They can still apply to come back in, and if that exception can always be remade. It's just not that they're automatically allowed as an exception. And then if those individuals came back and wanting another exception, we would reevaluate that exception based on the product that is currently available in the market by vendors that have already been approved or meet the 100 air mile distance policy. And I think the flurry of emails just was in response to seeing the 100 air mile distance policy, that one line in our policy manual, seeing that it was edited in some way, made it look like it was new or changed when the policy as it's been implemented hasn't really changed at all. It was the language that was changed in clarification on the grandfathering.
And not to be argumentative, but the change is grandfathering. That has not been in there.
No, it was.
Thank you.
It was in there. We had grandfathering in there. We had grandfathering in there.
It was in the previous version.
Yeah.
This is from 2012.
So what is the change in the 100 miles?
I think it's just air miles
No,
is mostly the biggest change.
It's air miles.
Driving miles to air miles, which expands the market quite a bit.
It's driving miles to air miles, and the language around the exception of who has the authority, and now including the Farmers Market Commission as bringing recommendation to the arts director.
And one of the other biggest changes that happened, because talking about resale, currently the blueberries that are sold in the market are resold by vendors that don't grow them themselves. And those blueberries are coming from 160, who knows, Oregon, many air miles away. And so one of the biggest changes that happened that we voted on as a commission is that blueberries and asparagus can be resold, but the big change that came is those blueberries and asparagus have to be being grown by a farmer who lives within 100 air miles of Moscow. So the current blueberries that are being resold would no longer be able to be resold in the market.
Why?
That's the biggest
Why?
change. Because, well, I can't speak for the whole commission as a whole, but my feeling on it and why we voted to approve that is because asparagus and blueberries do grow well in this region. There are people growing them within 100 miles, growing them themselves, that they wouldn't be being resold by someone who's not putting in the investment of the time and the money and the work. And if we could encourage that, if we could encourage the blueberries that are being grown more locally on the Palouse to be being sold, then we're just promoting the food shed of the Palouse even more than bringing them in, being sold from outside of that 100 miles.
Bill?
John?
Question. You're talking about the 100 miles, and if somebody grows blueberries outside the 100 miles, they can't bring them in. Somebody that grows blueberries inside the 100 miles can bring them in. Can't the pricing of the market take care of that? Person comes from outside of 100 miles, it's going to cost them more to bring their product to market. They're going to have to charge more, or they're going to go broke. The person that grows their blueberries within 15 miles of Moscow is going to be able to bring their stuff in, sell it at a smaller price or a lower price, and will have a competitive advantage, at least as far as selling their product first. And the person that comes from outside of the 100 miles would have to charge more, or should charge more. If they don't charge more, they're going to go broke, and you don't need to worry about them.
Well, currently, I would argue, the people that are selling the blueberries, they're reselling them. So they don't have to pay any of the money that it costs for the land, for the labor, for the plants, for the anything to grow those blueberries. So their costs are very low. All they have to do is pick up the blueberries and drive back and sell them. Whereas a farmer that's putting all of the investment in to grow those blueberries and all of the, and I'm a farmer too, so I could tell you about some of those costs. They are going to have a lot more costs even than that person that's driving, because that person that's driving is not growing them themselves. If it's somebody that's actually growing them that's coming in from outside of 100 miles and they're shouldering all of those costs, that would be different than someone that's just reselling blueberries outside of 100 miles.
Bill? Follow up?
You want to follow up, John? And then I'll go to Tom.
No,
John, go ahead.
John.
I'll
Go
do your
after.
follow-up, and then I'll go to Tom.
From what you just said, then I believe that the person that's growing blueberries 150 miles from here has no cost in the blueberries. Because when they put them in the basket and sell them to Tom to bring up here, don't they put all of the attendant cost on the blueberry and sell them to Tom, and then Tom has to sell them to somebody else?
I'd eat them first.
Okay, well, that solves that problem.
Okay.
Is that not true, or?
Let her answer that.
Let her ask.
I just wanted to say we've gotten into the price of blueberries per pint. We've priced out by the gallon. We've priced out, our commission has discussed blueberries and asparagus more so than I ever have in my life, and I know more about it than I ever will need to. The reason that this recommendation came across specifically for blueberries and asparagus is those were two items identified by the arts director as being very important to our consumers. Those are two items that help the market early in the season, and two items that people come for and look for. So those were two items we knew that were important to keep in our market. However, we wanted to try and have them come from the same 100 air miles that we require of all vendors. So it's consistent across all of our vendors, and our food system is staying within the 100 air miles as we see that it supports the mission. Now, one thing that Amanda didn't know is if we cannot find those items within our 100 miles, Kathleen still has the ability to bring them in from elsewhere. But we wanted to challenge ourselves to find them within the 100 miles so we can support that local food system that we've already developed within our policies. We've identified them. It's part of our commission's work and our charge to get them to come to market so we can meet that supply within the 100 air miles without having to go outside of it.
Let's go to Tom.
Thanks. One of the other things I wanted to point out, I know that we're spending a lot of time on asparagus and blueberries, and it to some people it must sound like a crazy idea because their experience of blueberries and asparagus is it's just one more produce or fruit selection in the grocery store, right? But when you're trying to grow asparagus or when you're trying to grow blueberries, it's an extremely different experience than growing broccoli or carrots or any annual crop like that. And by that I mean that if you're planting a seed for a broccoli plant, you're going to get that broccoli plant that year and be able to sell it. That's a different experience as a farmer who is trying to grow asparagus or blueberries. That takes many years from planting that plant to harvesting that plant and being able to sell it in a market. And when you have that many years involved, you're asking that farmer to invest a lot more time and money in producing that crop. The farmer is going to be less willing to do that if, this is how it was explained to me, they're going to be less willing to invest in those crops and take a bet on being able to sell it at a farmer's market than they would with one of those annual crops. And so the concept about the blueberry and asparagus exceptions within this particular rule was in understanding how this was all explained to us within the Farmers Market Commission. So it's a completely different experience. It's an understanding of the importance of the crops to the consumers, but then also understanding the time investment that it takes to get the stuff produced and grown in an area where we don't already have a huge amount of history of it being grown very close to town. So it's an attempt to try to change what's available for the consumers of Moscow.
Dan had a question.
So hopefully that helps to put it into perspective.
So if I'm getting this straight, you guys are, the commission is, and with Kathleen's help, is trying to actively recruit vendors within 100 miles.
Yes, specifically for those two products.
Especially for those two.
Yes.
So,
and if they don't have that availability, then they can look outside of that area.
Exactly.
Right. I mean,
that's what we're talking.
The hope is that the consumer on market day will not see a change in what produce is available specifically with those two items, but we'd like them to come from the same area that we require of our season.
One of the things I would suggest to this council is that we don't overmanage this.
Yeah, well, I've learned more about blueberries.
Well, I know that. That's why I mentioned. Now, what I would like, we've heard from you three ladies. Is there and Joanne, is there anybody else want to talk about this before we, thank you very much for your wonderful explanations. All right, well, if these guys are done, well, then we're going to go ahead and talk about it as a council.
And I got some other stuff then. If we're moving on to that.
We're moving on to that.
Okay, on the first page, Kathleen, I'm looking at the market policies.
Marked up ones.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's marked up or not, but I see, it says the market policies shall apply to Moscow Farmers Market and its vendors during the market season. These market policies have been developed from input sent to the City Council by the Farmers Market Commission, and in parentheses it says, which represents market vendor interests. And I think that the Market Commission doesn't just represent market vendor interests. I think you ought to add in there and community interests, because we have community members on there. So
Okay.
just have in there which represents market and community interests,
Or strike that altogether.
or strike that parentheses.
Yeah.
I mean, because if they want to know what's in the commission, they can look up who's on the commission. So
Okay.
maybe just strike the parentheses while we're at it.
Okay.
Okay. Or you had something?
Yeah, I was thinking about this more philosophically, in that the farmers market seems to be trying to serve two masters at the same time, the producers and the consumers. And by trying to straddle that divide, we're doing a merry jig of ordinance and legislation here. Whereas if it was decided one way or the other, or does the farmers market exist to foster new farmers and new producers to bring their produce to market, sort of an echo of the urban agriculture ordinance that was recently passed here? Or is it existing to provide the customers, the consumers, the residents of Moscow and surrounding area with fresh produce? And if one side or the other is decided on, the rest of the problem would seem to disappear immediately. And relative to the distance out and things like that, we have similar climates that are also radically different. We get the same day length, we get the same temperatures about, but elevation plays a big role in this. And I don't see an arbitrary distance being particularly efficacious in managing the market. I think that
Art, I got a question to ask you. You're just talking about the miles now. We're talking about elevations and all kinds of stuff.
Well, this is inclusive of that, because if you're talking that, I'm talking about seasonal progression of produce.
Okay.
Because the asparagus in Walla Walla is going to come on way before the asparagus in Troy, Idaho. So is it really a redundancy to establish an arbitrary mileage radius around Moscow to govern which produce can come into the market and which cannot, as opposed to saying run your area from the crest of the Cascades to the Continental Divide, from Canada to the 45th parallel, and then let both the economies of transportation and the seasonal progression of produce determine what shows up at the market. And a lot of the other issues just simply evaporate. Also, it would relieve you, the arts director, of having to make the decisions on who's in, who's out, and it would also lend predictability to both the growers and the consumers of who's actually, of what produce is actually going to be present. So I see some problems with that. And also within the language here, there's the phrase that caught my eye that says that there is no appeal after the decision of the commission on who stays and who goes. Yeah. Appendix 5, farmer market penalties. If you don't behave, there shall be no appeal of the decision regarding the penalties made by the market manager. And then it goes on to say that concerns can be expressed to city supervisor, city council, et cetera. And so that seems to be some language that's just begging for problems right there, kind of chasing itself in a circle. No appeal, but then you can appeal. And that would seem to be kind of draconian there as well. There's a lot of this stuff that seems to need a lot more discussion over the next year to nail down, including the definition of who a market vendor is, who the representative at the market can be. And to me, it's more the dimension, the scale of the producers that's a question than it is where they are. And how do you get a handle around that? And these are questions that are probably beyond our availability right here, but I do suggest that get rid of 100 or 200 miles. Anytime you put a hard number like that, you're almost begging for problems right there. Just stick with agroclimatics. Go from Cascades, the Continental Divide, Canada, to the 45th. Let distance, fuel, time involved by people, let that sort it out. And the seasonal progression of the produce within that area would also provide the consumers with a longer season for each one of these items, I think. So those are some of the points that I had.
Tom?
Well, I do think that there are aspects of the policy that can be revisited and looked at and changed over the next year. I think that the committee last week made the request that the commission look at the radius and also look at the market vendor definition as two things to look at next year. But I think we could certainly look at a number of these other things. We could identify a few things.
Gary had a point he wanted to make here, too.
What's that?
Gary had a point he was
okay, thanks.
Wanted to make, too, Tom. So.
Thanks. And so I just, my recommendation is that we support what's in front of us, knowing that there's an opportunity to look at these again, as we move forward for the next year.
I just wanted to put a plug in for the Farmers Market Commission. It is just about a year old. very contentious issue. I think Art makes a very good point. When we had the market surveyor, market consultant brought in, Aaron Zaretsky, about 2 years ago now, he advocated for a free market approach as well. In fact, I think he recommended a 250-mile radius or something like that, a fairly large area. Met with a lot of consternation by the vendors especially, but members of the public. So it is an evolving discussion, and with the relative youth of the commission, they put a lot of work in on this. Be my recommendation to the council that you let it evolve a little bit. See how it works. The 100 miles has worked since 2011, with exceptions for those types of products that are unavailable around here, or at least unavailable with any amount of regularity. So I think if they continue to look at it, continue to analyze it, they've only been on Main Street for 2 years now, the market just continues to evolve, and I think the Commission's doing a great job of keeping up with it. So I would recommend the Council move ahead with the recommendations of the Commission.
Mayor?
Walter.
Moving ahead with the recommendation, Gary, is accepting what's been put before us.
Yes.
And letting it work, just accepting what's put before us. I'm not comfortable with it. This council, 6 years ago, got into dictating what businesses could and couldn't do in Moscow, and I'm thinking specifically of the smoking in bars. I think that was the right thing to do. After the fact, we got a lot of criticism from people that said, I don't smoke, but you shouldn't be telling me I can't go in a smoking bar if I want to. The interesting thing was that the bar owners never did complain about it or criticize us. There we had a health issue. Mm-hmm. We all believed it. We still think it was the right thing to do. This is not a health issue. This is market-driven economic crafts and produce and product. And I agree with John when he made the comment a while ago that you cannot buy blueberries in Tacoma for nothing that don't have the cost of production in them. The cost of production is going to be in those blueberries, whether they're grown in Tacoma or grown in Viola. The one coming from Tacoma is going to have to spend gas money to get here. The one from Viola could do them on a bicycle. At least Tom could.
Tom will eat them.
So you know the economy will, I think, will adjudge it. I'm with Art in terms of let it work. I don't like putting the arts director, market manager in the position of picking winners and losers. I think that they're being set up to be asked, well, you picked Art, why won't you let me be in there? And then they're having to defend their choices. We heard from a lot of consumers, and they're saying 200. Art is talking larger than that. I don't like restricting it to 100. The vendors were not happy with us when we moved it to Main Street. We did it because 86% of a surveyed group of customers said, we love it on Main Street. I wish the vendors would come back to us now telling us we made a mistake, we shouldn't have moved it, put it back in the parking lot, and we did the wrong thing, but I haven't heard that. I want to believe they're selling more product. They're making more money. It's worth their time to come down here and set up on Main Street. It was a change. People don't like change. I don't like change. But I'm just not sure that this grandfathered 100, which is setting people up to, if you miss a year, you're at risk. Why would they bother? They bother now because they can make money. Tonemaker doesn't come from wherever in the world he is here, set up 4 cash registers and bring I don't know how many people to work that thing just because he's making gas money. I don't think. I don't know what he's making, have no idea, but he's not just making gas money, he wouldn't bother with it. Thank you.
What direction are we going to go here, guys?
I would like to see us approve the the resolution, the proposed.
Making a motion, Tom?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve what's been brought for us by our commission and move it forward, and also request that they continue to look at these items in the within this next year to continue to give us advice on future policy.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion by Tom and a second by Dan. John?
I'll amend that motion to 200 miles.
Well, Tom made the motion, Dan seconded it,
Yeah,
You
and
can make an amendment.
I'm
If
amending
somebody
his
seconded
motion. I'm offering to make an amendment to his motion to increase the 100 miles to 200 miles for the reasons I've given before. It's market-driven, and I think that the customer should have the opportunity, and I think the farmer's market should be customer-based, shouldn't be based on vendors. And that's the reason for my motion. I don't know if I'll get a second or not.
Well, you made a motion, Walter seconded it. So now we vote on the first motion first.
Vote on
The amendment. Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendment, and we're going to start with you,
We
Art.
can discuss.
Well, we can discuss the.
You want to
attributes
discuss the
of each.
amendment?
Well, yeah, I don't like the hard and fast numbers particularly, but I do think that by way of avoiding unpredictability in who's in and who's out, it seems like the people who are here now are all well within the 200-mile radius. And therefore, I think, to me, it makes more sense than 100. And I think seasonal progression of produce will allow this to go off without any ruffling of feathers within the market, which may have been discussed by the commission before, but I just have real problems with arbitrary numbers that we've pulled out of the air. And so I would support that amendment.
Tom has something to say?
Well, I'll vote against the amendment. At this point, I mean, I think if the Farmers Market Commission brought 200 to us, and they have had good reason for doing it after a year of, or even 3 months of studying it, not 30 minutes of studying it tonight, I would be happy to support it. But if the Farmers Market Commission is not ready to bring that forward to us yet, I won't support it. So I don't have a dog in the fight about some specific distance. I don't, to me, it doesn't matter if it's 100, 125, 150, 200, specifically on that number. What I'm more concerned about is the process of engaging a farmers market commission last March. Well, I guess it was May that they started. And then, not accepting their recommendation at this point. I think that we've asked them, we've charged them with looking at the radius in this next year, and I would like to give them that chance. And I think if we just, change their recommendation at this point significantly with changing the radius, I don't think we're doing the process a service.
Dan?
I don't know that there's any commission that we haven't changed what they recommended at some point. I mean, I appreciate all the work that the Farmers Market Commission is doing, but, I don't think that any commission comes in here thinking that sometimes maybe they think that they hit the homer with it, but I think every commission comes in probably think, okay, the council's going to put their stamp on it with whatever, and this may be our stamp. We haven't voted on it yet, so I don't know. But, I don't think, and I wouldn't say that we don't appreciate the commission's work if we do vote this direction. I think there's still the bulk of the policy there that they did work on, and there's still good items in it.
Walter?
Mr. Mayor, I'd call for the question.
Okay, the question has been called for, so what we're voting on, folks, is the amendment. John made that motion, Walter second. We'll start with you, Art.
Aye.
Aye.
No.
No.
Aye.
Okay, it passed 3-2 for a 200-mile radius. Now we'll go with the vote on the motion that Tom made to accept
The vote on the motion as amended.
As amended.
as amended.
To adopt the policies with the exception of the 100 turning into 200.
That's correct.
mile radius.
Mhm. And we will start with a roll from John.
Aye.
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 Okay, and that passed 5-0. So what we've got is the resolution with the change. The only change on it is the 200 miles.
Well, and then
That's not true, Mayor.
striking that
I have another
parentheses.
motion to make regarding the resolution, if I may.
Okay.
After a question to Kathleen, with the change to 200, are the two, I think there are two places where exceptions are noted in what's been brought before us. Are those exceptions any longer necessary?
For the arts director and the manager to make.
Correct. Yes, those
Um,
two. One, if I may. One is authority to grant an exception to the 100-mile air limitation of rest with the arts director. That's on page 1. I would propose
not needed.
that's no longer needed. And the other one is, that I think, is under resale produce vendors. There's an exception there that also includes the 100 air mile radius language.
If I may, the motion as passed merely got rid of the 100 and inserted 200.
I understand, sir. Thank you. Is the second exception applicable with the change to 200?
I think there's blueberries and asparagus within 200, and I don't think it'll need to be resold.
So
Is that your question?
I'm prepared to make a motion to strike the exception language in two places. I'm looking for clarification on whether or not I do more harm
Your Honor,
than just cleaning it
That
up.
Hang on a
requires a
second, Walter.
motion for reconsideration.
No, I'm not reconsidering anything.
You're amending the,
I am not.
Something that was already approved. That's what he's saying.
I guess I'm missing it.
If I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
We changed 100 to 200. That's done. I'm preparing to make a motion.
The motion was
And
to
the
pass the
rest.
policies
We passed the
with the
policies.
amendment of 100 to 200.
And that's what we
So all I'm saying,
don't need it.
Walter, is that
I mean, you don't need
if you're desiring to amend the policy further, correct?
Apparently.
They'll be in there.
So
I thought we just added 100 to 200. If it included passing the whole thing,
that was the motion.
Yeah,
That was the
that was
original
the-
motion.
yeah.
That was the motion that John amended. So I'm sorry.
so with everybody voting unanimously to do it, can anybody call it back up?
You can vote to reconsider it and adjust that if you like.
Because I would like to clean out the exception language, if Kathleen agrees with me that it no longer applies. And secondly, I'd like to clean up the appeal language that Art pointed out earlier, before we just walk away from this.
In order to reconsider, someone who voted on the winning side of the motion must bring it up for reconsideration. Hang on, can we take just a second?
Yes.
Okay, I think we've got it.
Okay.
If you made a motion to amend the policy that was just passed by the council.
Hey, can we hold it
remove
down out
those
there,
things,
please?
Then that would be,
Please sit down.
okay. So you can do it by just an amendment at this point.
Okay,
Amend the policy to remove those.
which is where I was going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. I got an answer to my first exception item. I'm not sure we were clear on whether or not the second one no longer applies regarding the resale part.
I think probably only the first one.
Okay, go again. Thank you.
My interest, if I
Yep.
may,
Yeah, go ahead.
my interest is in cleaning out exception language if it no longer applies. And the first one is authority, quote unquote, authority to grant an exception to the 100-mile air limitation rest with the arts director. Since we have changed the 100 to 200, I would propose that exception would no longer be applicable.
Correct. As long as we're following through with, there would be no resale. because there's two things there.
And then the second one has to do with resale.
Okay.
And in that language, the exception is to do with blueberries and asparagus grown outside the 100 air mile radius. Well, we've now included up to 200. So is that exception still needed or not? And if it is, I'm okay. I'm just trying to clean
Well,
this up.
the history of the market, the two vendors that did bring in blueberries in volumes were both reselling those blueberries, and they were within the 200 miles. They weren't the growers. So the problem comes in if we don't get a replacement vendor to supply the customer with that volume of blueberries, we might have a problem.
They might not come at all.
Well, no, I
Because
think,
you couldn't resell them, they're not going to bring them.
right.
So I think we need to retain the exception language there.
Okay.
I think you need a little bit if we don't get a supplier within the 200 mile to meet the customer need.
Okay, then, thank you. So therefore, Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Okay,
I would make a motion that we drop the fourth paragraph under market policies on page 1 of the farmers market policies previously approved. That's the one beginning authority to grant an exception to the 100, et cetera, that full paragraph. And secondly, in the same motion, that the fifth paragraph of Appendix 5 that begins, "There shall be no appeal," be reworded to read, "Appeal of a decision regarding penalties made by the market manager by the aggrieved person or entity may be made by communicating their concern in writing to the Moscow Arts Director, City Supervisor," et cetera, as written in the paragraph.
I'll second.
is that, you done with your motion?
I'm done. That's the motion. And
Okay,
John,
everybody get what the motion is and what the second,
Do we not need a motion to reconsider?
there's a motion and a second on this, but what if there's discussion amongst the rest of the group, they can discuss it.
The policy, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, the motion was to strike out the fourth, under market policies, the fourth paragraph on page 1 and the fifth paragraph on Appendix 5.
Modified.
To modify
Modify.
what Walter had read it. Did you get that modification, Stephanie?
Could you restate the modification on the Appendix 5?
the fifth paragraph shall begin with the word "appeal," not in quotes, "of a decision regarding penalties made by the market manager by the aggrieved person or entity may be made by communicating their concerns in writing," et cetera, as written in the paragraph.
Okay.
I guess my comment would be, stating concerns, when you say there's an appeal, do you mean that decision of the market manager can be reversed by? Appeal means there's the ability to either affirm or reverse, or modify the decision somehow. Is that what you intend?
My intent is to clean up what Art pointed out, which is it says first there's no appeal, and then it tells them how to appeal.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not, if I may.
Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, an appeal, at least to our legalistic minds over here, means that you have the ability to have a decision reviewed and then reverse, modified, or affirmed. The way I read this, and I believe the intent was, even though there's no appeal, you can't change that decision that was made on the ground. You may communicate your concerns to the market manager's boss, the arts director, the arts director's boss.
Without any hope of reversal.
Exactly.
I am trying to
So you wish to create an appeal?
Correct.
Okay, then, in that case, I would want the city attorney to set up an appeals process, because who is going to set up that appeal? Who do you want to hear? Does the city council want to hear those appeals? If the market manager, for instance, says, no, you can't set up here, I want you to set up there, is the council going to want that decision ultimately to come to you in a council meeting? Or is it, if the market manager makes a decision, you can appeal that decision to the arts director?
This is under Appendix 5. It says farmers market penalties. It has nothing to do with where you're setting up. It's a penalty. Appendix 5, farmers market penalties.
Gary, could we do this? Could I make a motion that that paragraph be reviewed by staff and brought back at the next council meeting with a proposal regarding creating appeal process?
Yeah, what you could do is you could pass the market policies as amended tonight by resolution with the direction that you wish Appendix 5 to be reviewed by the city attorney and the market commission, arts director.
Staff?
Yeah.
You bet, and bring that back to administrative committee for review and then to be added as an appendix to the policy.
That works for me. I still want to, so that would
That's
be.
also removing your other part.
But I also want to remove that fourth paragraph on page 1 of the market policy.
I think we can decipher the motion.
Can the seconder decipher?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay.
We clear on everything? Everybody
So,
clear?
Bill, can I make a statement here? This was our first, I just want to give everybody a little history here. These policies were created in 12. They were they weren't even reworked in 13. We're going into 14. As far as the penalty process, we've gotten through the first penalty on several vendors. We haven't made it to a second penalty or a third penalty. So the minimal effort that it takes to do a first penalty has worked between two staff, myself and the market manager. So I just want to give you that little brief history. So this was a first crack at a penalty process. It has never been altered since 12. But just to give you a little history, we've only made it to first penalty, and it's corrected errors. And it's worked in a very limited way. The language that's on the page on Appendix 5 could be improved, but you have to have a step process. So I'd be glad to work.
I'm not addressing the step process.
Yeah, it's just the
many
verbiage.
things that occur in this city are appealable somewhere.
Okay.
Police chief execution orders of a dog are appealable to the city supervisor. Other things are appealable to city council. All I'm trying to do is create the appeal process because Art pointed out the fact that it appeared that that paragraph contradicted itself.
Okay.
Which we're really not doing, you guys are not doing anything with that tonight anyway.
Correct. Let them work on it.
Okay, we ready to vote? I'll start with Art.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye.
Okay, passed 4-1 to accept it. And Stephanie, I guess you've got it the way it's wrote. Basically, you're just striking out paragraph, or the fourth, on under market policies, the fourth paragraph on page 1. And that for further review, fifth paragraph on appendix 5. That's how I got it.
There you go.
Okay, we're done with that. We're moving on, folks. Thank you, guys.
If I may, we still have a resolution that needs to be passed.
You did, yeah, you had to read
Okay, it's resolution 2014 something. Dash 05? Is that correct? Okay. We just passed resolution number 2014-05.
Well, you got to read the title.
Which has to do with the resolution of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, amending the City of Moscow, Idaho farmers market policies included herein and incorporating them herein by this reference, providing that these resolutions be effective upon its passage, approval, and publication according to law. Anything else, Gary?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
We're moving on to the next thing. Thank you, folks, that work on the Farmer Market Commission for the diligent work and the hard efforts that you do. And we do have a terrific market, period, end of story. I've been going to it for decades. And so good job, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to reports. And we will start with administrative reports. Tom, you are the chair of that commission.
Yes, and we heard everything tonight in both the consent agenda and this last item.
Okay. Do you have any other reports while I got you?
Yes, I could report on the, I attended the Parks and Rec Commission meeting a couple of weeks ago, and the main item was the presentation that we passed during the consent agenda, which was the presentation by the county coming to seek approval for their grant application for Phillips Farm.
Okay.
And then I was in Boise last week and did not attend the Clearwater RC&D meeting, but it was in Boise for the Association of Idaho Cities meeting instead.
Okay.
Thanks.
Very good. Walter, Public Works and Finance.
Public Works heard a second-time report on right-of-way tree trimming by Tyler Palmer and Les McDonald. They brought some information regarding what other nearby communities are doing with their public right-of-way tree trimming. We asked them to go back and formulate a proposed policy with a suggestion that it be an either-or. The primary question seeming to be whether or not the city should ask people to trim their bushes and trees and shrubs in the right-of-way, and if they don't, we do it for them free, or whether or not we notify them, give them an opportunity to get it taken care of, and if we do it, we bill for it. So they're going back and rethinking that, and we'll be coming back through Public Works Finance before it ever comes to council. But that'll be moving forward. I also attended the Association of Idaho Cities in Boise last week. Probably the most interesting thing, well, yeah, I guess the most I heard down there was that our local legislators, Shirley Ringo, Dan Schmidt, and Cindy Agidius, told us that there were things that were actually going to happen in this legislative session. I would have lost that bet, I thought, because everybody's up for re-election, and the governor's already announced that his interest is in getting re-elected and not necessarily doing anything. I thought that the legislature would pretty much get done by Valentine's Day and go home. Apparently there are some things at work, and we shall see how that turns out. One of them is very local, and that is another movement to allow weapons on campus in certain instances. I saw in the paper today that all state college, university, and college presidents voted against that, as did the entire State Board of Education, but there is an effort to allow that. So stay tuned for that one. It'll apply to Moscow. The other thing was the JFAC passed a governor's recommendation for, was it $15 million? Les is gone. I can't ask him. To do planning work with water in the state of Idaho. And upon my questioning of PBAC, it went up the chain to Idaho Department of Water Resources, and they said that there was some money in the original discussions of that $15 million for some money to be spent on planning on the Palouse. So they are looking at the way the motion was made at JFAC and whether or not they need to go back and legislatively adjust that, or should or could or would. So we may maybe get a few dollars here in the Palouse Basin regarding our water and our planning, and not all of the northern money go to the Rathdrum Aquifer. That's all I've got.
Okay. Art.
I attended the Sustainable Environment meeting several weeks back. Subsequently, it's been bumped twice now because of displaced city council meetings that occur on the same day. Let's see, the Paradise Path people have done well in revising their mission statement. It's before Parks and Rec for review before it comes to this body for final approval. And they've identified a lot of orphan bike paths and are working to establish signage to announce those to the public. Things like between Mountain View and Ponderosa, and between Van Buren and the city shops and E Street. So places like that where people are actually using it, it belongs to the city, and they're working to identify and flag those and maybe even get the trails paved on those stretches. So the Paradise Path people are making good progress. I'm happy to report. And they'll report to us, too, at the next quarterly report that they have.
Okay. Thanks, Art. Dan?
All of my commissions meet this week, so I don't have any reports other than I want to thank Wayne and Art for attending the U of I's 125th birthday.
You missed a good one.
Last week. I was a student during the 100th birthday, and my son's a student during the 125th birthday, so I guess there's some kind of legacy there. But I appreciate those guys going out and stepping up, and Wayne was not at a loss for words, it sounds like. So.
Okay. John?
I got my dates mixed up, so I missed the last meeting of the Human pardon me? The Human Rights, yeah. And consequently, I'll have to make the one this month. I went to a planning and zoning meeting. They installed a new committee chair, Nels Peterson, and for the most part, housekeeping issues were discussed. Some transportation issues were discussed, but everything was done in a general way. So that's pretty much what I have.
Okay. Well, as your mayor, a couple of things I'll go over for me. I'm going to go back just a couple of weeks ago to January 18th when we had the Martin Luther King breakfast and listened to the main speaker, Les Purser, gave a very inspirational speak. And Councilors Tom Lamar and Councilors John Weber was there as well as I was, and I was able to present various certificates for kids in various schools on both essays as well as art exhibits, which was very, very nice. And one of the things that I was really most proud of was the winner of the award, the Human Rights Award for this year, was Bruce Pittman, the Dean of Students at the University of Idaho. And I've known Dean for decades, and he's a very humble guy and very well deserving of all the people I know in this town. He was very well deserving of that. So I felt pretty proud to not only know that Bruce received that award, but to be a part of that as well, to be there. And then last week, as well as Walter and Tom Lamar, John Weber was down at the AIC meetings, also the Association of Idaho Cities, on January 30th, 31st, and met with various legislators. And it was a very invigorating process for me. I get a chance to get to know a number of different mayors, as well as not only our legislators, but other legislators, and visiting the Capitol building. And I will be back to doing that again down the road. So that's my reports. We do have a county commissioner here that I want to recognize, Richard Wallace. Richard, do you want to address the council or this meeting at all? No?
You need to come to the podium.
Richard, I got a haircut today, but I didn't know I was going to get complimented for it. So,
I'm Richard Wallace from the County Commissioner, District 1. I just wanted to thank you, gentlemen. It was reported to me that you approved a grant that we were interested in for Phillips Farm, and so we appreciated your support. I'm speaking for our County Commissioner now. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, with that, folks, we are going to. I'd like to see if we could make a motion to adjourn to executive session per Idaho Code 67-23451,
So moved.
I'll second that, and will we not be reconvening?
We will not reconvene after the executive session. I'll start with Art.
Aye.
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 Aye.